All right, we're live. Welcome to the latest installment of the Run to Daylight podcast. I'm your host, Todd Burrows. Still trying to figure out how to look into a microphone like a human being. I moved the mic today because it might not be as close in as before, but it is because I have to be able to see my full screen for the draft for the second half. So we're back. If you haven't heard already, Eric Moody has moved on to greener pastures. I always tell my partners you'll probably end up more famous than myself. It normally takes a little longer than 3 weeks, but Eric has moved on to better pastures. He was probably more famous than I was to begin with. I'll be joined today by my guest Shane Hallam. We're both in tonight's Revelations draft on the FPC. I love playing on the FPC. You can go to myffpc.com and see all their offerings. Best ball. Tomorrow, Shane and I are... Dang it. Tomorrow, Shane and I are in a Dynasty League rookie draft. And I'm going to ask him a question about that draft in a second, but because I just saw he made a trade. But also, the FFPC is where I've been playing most of my best ball this year, 28 rounds. I like the 6-hour drafts. I like that I can build in different ways with the unique scoring, tight end premium, 2 wide receivers starting, kicker in the defense. Gives you more advantage with roster construction and edge as well. So go to myffpc.com. Maybe you'll get into a $35 with me. Shane, we got to talk about Dynasty because I don't talk about it very often, but you had a very, very interesting strategy last year. And that strategy was basically to try and get everyone's first round pick this year. And you accomplished 10 out of 12, which is the most I've ever seen. Originally, this was supposed to be one of the stronger draft classes, I think. And now people are talking about it because of the opt-outs and a lot of the issues with COVID, that it might be one of the worst draft classes ever. Are you disappointed in not the strategy, because no one really could have planned for what happened, but are you disappointed with this draft class in general?
I'm not. I don't prescribe to that. I think this draft class, when we look back in
what do you prescribe to? Quaaludes?
Look, I mean, I think if you can, but that's another topic for another day. No, I think when we look back in 5 or 6 years, is this going to be an all-star class like 2020? No. Is it going to be, the 2019 class of Hakeem Butler and Kelvin Harmon? No. I think it'll be somewhere in the middle. I'm still
mourning Hakeem Butler. I liked his tape. I knew there were issues, but man, he could never even get a sniff.
Yeah, at all. And now he's playing tight end. He's not even playing receiver, so it's fairly hopeless. So I don't think it's going to be like that. I think this receiver class is still super strong, super healthy. I think the running back class took a hit because of what happened, and that hurts me in my strategy and how I kind of approached our startup and how I was going to approach this draft. I really thought the running back class would end up stronger than it was. But I still think it's solid. And I think if you can get values, because people think the class is bad, I think this class is going to be better than 2022 will be. And so I think you can maybe even move a future first for a late first this year and, end up in the positive.
Interesting. Good. Very, very good tip, Shane. Give me for Dynasty, your tier 1 and your tier 2 rookies for this year, and how many for the FFPC, and how many are how many tier 1s and how many tier 2 players do you have?
So I kind of feel like there is kind of a top five. I think the top five are one tier for me. Obviously, I have preferences within that, but I think if you get one of the top five players, you'll be happy. I think Jamar Chase, the receiver in Cincinnati, Kyle Pitts, the tight end in Atlanta, and then I think you have the three running backs: Najee Harris in Pittsburgh, Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, Javonte Williams in Denver. I think if you end up with one of those five players, you're fairly happy. Maybe Javonte Williams bumps up in there more than some people may have for me because of the scarcity of running backs in this class and in general in fantasy football. So to me, I think that's still a win. And then I think tier two is fairly murky. I kind of have
you kind of already answered my question.
Yeah.
So I've got pick 1-6. So I was hoping to hear a sixth name, because as you say, it's pretty murky. I'm hoping that someone falls in love with Devonta Smith, or someone falls in love with Mr. Waddle. And if I have to pick at 6, I'm pretty sure which one of those two I would go with. Is there anyone else at 6 that you would consider besides those two?
No. And honestly, I would not consider Devonta Smith. So I have kind of one player that I would consider at the 6, and that would be Jalen Waddle. I think he's a step above that next tier of receivers.
And that's who I was leaning towards anyway. Yeah. I like the way that he really flashes on tape, right? And unlike, people want to compare him to John Ross. And I think John Ross has had he's never been healthy. Right. When I watched John Ross tape coming out, he had a very good couple moves to get off the block. I thought he was more than just a speedster, but unfortunately, he's never really had a chance to show it. I feel the same way about Jalen Waddle. I feel, he gets that tag of being a speedster, but I really feel like there might be a lot more to his game than just that.
And I think the Dolphins picking him as high as they did makes you feel pretty good about the injury. I think the ankle injury is probably the concern there. And maybe, PPR wise, is he going to have the targets? Is he going to have the catches?
Is Tua any good?
Right.
Right. I mean,
sure.
That seems, and there's two other decent receivers there. And Gesicki. I really feel like, Shane, what ended up happening is there was very Dave Gettleman-y of them. Gettleman went into this draft saying, I'm going to get a wide receiver. And when Devonta Smith, wasn't there, he finally trades down, gets some good value, and then reaches for Kadarius Toney. I feel like that might have been what happened with the Dolphins. I really think that they expected Mr. Sewell to go to Cincinnati, and I thought they thought that one of Atlanta or Cincinnati wouldn't. I really believe that they moved up to 6, thinking they were going to get Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase.
Well, I'll blow your mind. Jalen Waddle was the number 1 receiver on their board. They had him above Jamar Chase.
Really?
He was going to be the pick, and that's why they moved up to 6, because they were happy with any of the 3. And Jalen Waddle was actually number 1. They wanted that, I think they wanted that weapon more than anything, and I think, with the weapons there you mentioned, none of them are going to be there in a year. Mike Gesicki, his contract's up. They drafted a tight end to replace him already.
Right.
Devontae Parker.
I'm transitioning more toward transitioning more to this year, but you're right. Yeah. We were talking about our dynasty league and my pick. And I'm that is all encouraging. You know me, I'll always be open to trade down when I'm on the clock.
Oh yeah.
To me, dynasty is a value proposition, and I just don't have the energy to stay on top of the value like I did when I was younger, because my whole strategy is based on being able to identify value and then make a lot of trades, each one gaining a little bit of value. And then you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm a rich man. How did you get rich? Well, I did it one trade at a time. It's really hard to trade like that these days. I think when we all first got online, I mean, you're younger than me, but we used to talk trade until like 2 a.m. You were in leagues with guys. You get on AIM and you would talk and talk, and the more you would get to know people, the more you were able to kind of identify where your view of value and their view of value is different. So you didn't even have to, quote, rip people off all the time. You just had a higher sense of value. It's much harder to trade than it used to be. Would you agree?
Yeah, I feel that way too. I think too, like, because maybe it's because of social media and just talking about it, like the idea of trade etiquette's a bit different too. Just of like to really get things rolling. I know you're someone that reaches out, you like to talk about it. And I do too, to an extent, but it seems like people are very easy to get offended by an offer or vice versa. And it's like, sometimes you gotta, start somewhere and move as much as you can, in our startup to get 10 of those 12 first round picks. I mean, it was me barraging people with picks. Like, it
was so annoying.
Plenty of people now.
And after all that, I finally trade you one, and I trade you the wrong one. So you got 3 and I got 6. I'm so upset with myself. Who did I get in that trade? Do you remember?
I don't. I can look it up, but I don't remember.
Let's look that up.
How it ended up. So yeah, I mean, like, that almost becomes the way that you have to do it to get anything done, is this kind of like carpet bombing of trades. And that's not like super fun, So for me in that Pros versus Joe's league, I wanted to try this strategy and write about it. And like, I knew I was gonna, piss some people off, but that was what it ended up being.
Yeah, well, how do you find last year's?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I have the. No, I see all the rejections you gave me, but.
Oh. Hold on. There's got to be a way on the site to. Oh, here we go. View season 2020. Now I'll be able to find it.
Yeah, I don't see
Pros v Joe. Now I gotta know. I know that the literally the 3 listeners I have don't give a shit, but
and that's sometimes depressing, sometimes good to look back and see and like, oh, okay, maybe it's maybe it wasn't so bad or whatever. But
yeah, I don't see. It's funny. Oh, there we go. Live Genesis. Nope, that's not the one.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, they don't have my. It's so weird. They have all my 2020 leagues except this one there.
Yeah, maybe it's something with. I'll keep poking while we keep going. I'll interject if I could find it here in my email. So we'll get there. There's lots.
Yeah.
But
there's got to be a way. I don't know if anyone can tweet me if you're watching and how to find it. Dang it. It would have been on that one.
Yeah. But, I think these, these rookie drafts, I haven't done any kind of traditional ones. All my FFPC ones kick off tomorrow as well. So, I've done some super flex and some weird deep dynasty leagues. So I'm interested to see kind of that late first into second round. I think a lot of those values just get come up. There's a lot of good receivers. There's not a lot of running backs. And it's like, do you want to reach for Trey Sermon? Do you want to reach for Michael Carter? Or just kind of gather receiver value, I think is intriguing. That's probably going to be the extent.
Gotcha. Keep talking for a sec.
Yeah.
You know what? Talk about Javonte Williams in Denver and where you would take him in, a draft like the one we have tonight. Just, you don't have to give me, what round fine. would you like, what's your thoughts on Javonte Williams to Denver?
Yeah. So I think Denver is a decent spot. I think it's a decent spot for, for best ball, especially this season. Melvin Gordon has 1 year left on his deal. He's not going to go away, but I think that you are starting to see, obviously Denver is going to move. They don't have a quarterback, so they're going to have to run the ball more. They actually ran it fairly successfully last year. They have a good run blocking offensive line. So I'm a fan of Javonte Williams for this season. I think he's going to be like Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins was, where early in the season it's like, he's not quite getting the carries that you would want ideally. But if you're in contention toward the end of the year, I think he can be one of those players that kind of takes you over the top and takes you through, where you wanted to go. So, I haven't done too many best ball redrafts. You're definitely well advanced than I am in terms of where these players are going round wise. But I wouldn't be afraid to, let Najee Harris is going to go super early and let Travis Etienne go, and I wouldn't be afraid to scoop him up if I could get him as an RB4 or if I waited on RB3. I think I would take that chance and hopefully be able to build my depth enough to handle early season. And then I think he could take over in kind of that late season.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on him. I took him the other day instead of Myles Gaskin, not because I thought it was a better person to have, but I just thought that overall, Gaskin might had a chance to make it back to me, but I knew Javonte wouldn't. So I think Michael Carter is going to get overdrafted. I think that people are going to, one of the ways we really can take advantage in fantasy football, not used to the thing here, is people getting over enthusiastic. I call it the Wile E. Coyote effect, where you're so anxious to get somebody, you're running off the cliff. And I think Michael Carter, they can talk all they want about how they love him. He's a guy who split the job in college. I find it unlikely, especially year one, that, he's starting to go like right in that 6th, 7th round range. That's a little early for me for redraft. Your thoughts on Michael Carter, the Jets? I mean, it's not going to probably be a great offense.
No, I don't think it's going to be a great offense. I think they'll be better than last season. I think they have enough weapons. The offensive line's improved. But at the same time, I think that Michael Carter's not necessarily that much better than the rest of the running backs there. Not that they're good. Like, I think as fantasy players, sometimes we get sucked into, we know Tevin Coleman's not very good. We know LaMichael Pirines not very good. We know Ty Johnson's not very good. Do the Jets really know that? Are they really not going to utilize those guys? I mean, LaMichael Pirine, in terms of draft capital, was the same round as Michael Carter. I think it was 15 picks later. So I don't think Michael Carter is going to step in there and be a workhorse running back. A, he's not built for that. And B, they have other players. The
that
Jets.
Tyron Johnson, is it Tyron?
Ty
Johnson. Tyron is the wide receiver in San Diego, who I like too. But Ty Johnson, he averaged over 5 yards a carry, small sample size, but he looked pretty good doing it. And that's what I mean by assumptions. Right now, if you look at fantasymojo.com, and Darren will be on next week, most likely, you've got Michael Carter as the 78th player going off the board, ahead of Leonard Fournette, ahead of Trey Sermon, ahead of David Johnson and Ronald Jones at the running back position, ahead of Robbie Anderson, Debo, Tyler Boyd, Will Fuller at wide receiver. He's gone as early as 6'1", as late as 8'12", and his median right now in Football Guys tournaments is pick 7-6. That's pretty aggressive. That's
pretty aggressive for a guy that didn't go until the 4th round. And you could hit. But like, I would rather have Trey Sermon myself. I think he's tailor-made for the 49ers. I think that, Raheem Mostert's not anything special. So the fact that Michael Carter is going above him in some of these drafts to me is bonkers. Like, I know NFL teams get it wrong, and like, I'm not going to draft Kadarius Toney early, right? Like, we get it, but in terms of draft capital, there's a big difference between mid round 3 and early round 4, more than we think.
Okay, so I see your note. You,
I found the trade. Yeah,
and I got DK Metcalf, and what else?
So essentially, I moved from the.
I moved up to get DK Metcalf.
Yeah, you moved up from the 8th to the 4th round,
and then I traded DK Metcalf in a deal that got me Akers, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So I think it worked out fine for you, even with the 1-3.
It did, but when you would have taken either one.
Oh, absolutely.
And I should have thought I was over optimistic on my team, I guess, that I would be good. But the guy that had the other one had traded. I didn't see enough of the team yet, right. But he had made that horrible trade with me for Barkley for pick 2 that got me all this value. And I didn't count on my first round pick, George Kittle, getting hurt. And a couple other of my wide receivers got hurt that I put early capital on. So, my pick ended up being better. Trey Sermon is the next guy that I want to talk about. It's a very convoluted situation in that San Francisco backfield. But you want to talk about a guy that you talk like I feel a lot better about Javonte Williams getting an early season role than maybe Trey Sermon. But I could see Trey Sermon being the Raheem Mostert of a couple years ago, running behind that line with that great ability to cut back. I mean, his one defining feature on tape to me is that one cut and go. And so that's perfect for this offense, especially an offense that should have huge holes. I don't know that he has from what I saw of tape, that kind of deep speed where once he breaks into the open, he's gone. But I could see him getting a lot of chunks. Any of that stuff you disagree with?
No, I agree with you. Definitely Trey Sermon's best quality is one cut ability in the zone scheme. 49ers run the outside zone. That's exactly what he ran at Ohio State. That's where you saw him have his best football and play his best football. Like that's almost the best system he possibly could have been drafted for. And so if you like Trey Sermon before the draft, you really should like him now. Yeah, there's a lot of running backs there in San Francisco now. But
other than having so many other running backs there, it's the ideal spot for him. In other words, if he can get to play, it is, between that offensive line, they brought in Trent Williams last year, Alex Mack this year. Kittle is back and healthy and is one of the best tight blockers in the league. Mike Juszczyk is one of the best blockers in the league. None of these running backs might get touched. So if you can get the right one, it could really pay off. I think the one that it's just a feeling of mine, but I think Raheem Mostert he's the first one being drafted, and he's the one that I want the least because they almost were, teams show you what they think about people. They almost were willing to let him go last year and not pay him anything. Finally, they gave him a little bit of a raise, and he got hurt. Jeff Wilson played, I think, better than Mostert last year. And right now, I kind of am much more interested in Mostert and Wilson than I am. Wilson and Sermon than I am Mostert. Would you agree?
Yeah. Let's even say Wayne Gallman. They signed him. I think he's had a couple good seasons.
I almost mentioned him too.
Yeah.
He did that with the Giants, that cut and go. Gallman could. That's the sad thing. If you're playing best ball, and you can get him in the 24th, 25th round, that's not a bad pick.
No, I agree with you on Jeff Wilson. I think that he's probably the best value to production ratio in that backfield, other than maybe Sermon. I think Sermon has a little more upside. I mean, I even like their 6th-round pick in Elijah Mitchell as a very similar running back to Sermon with a little more deep speed. And it's Jermichael Hasty's still there. He had a couple good games. But it seems like they're not very happy with Mostert and Wilson to bring in 3 running backs in a matter of 2 weeks. So I think something's going to give there a little bit.
Yeah, well, Kyle Shanahan, I always say, is like a 14-year-old girl, and running backs are the new boy band. He just gets infatuated, and then he falls out of love, and he finds someone else to love. He way overpaid for Jerick McKinnon, and that's the scary part about Sermon and the draft capital that they put in to get him, which would often lead you to want to believe that he does have a really good shot to be the guy this year. But Shanahan, he just falls in and out of love way too much to make me feel comfortable.
And it's not like, the 3rd round of the NFL draft for running backs isn't that's not a wedding ceremony. Like, if they would have taken him in the 2nd, I'd feel a lot more comfortable putting Sermon on.
Didn't they trade up for him though?
They did, but you know what? I think that's a trap too that we get into sometimes. Like, this team traded up for this guy. And
I don't say it means everything, but in other words, when you're dealing with a guy where you're trying to feel the vibes, and it doesn't move your analysis from here to here, but it could move your analysis from here to here. I think it's some people want to make it to be everything, and I agree with you. It's not everything. But draft capital and how teams use it is something.
Well, and I think it's interesting. There's an article on Panthers.com today about Carolina's draft process and trading and their horizontal versus vertical board and why they took players where they did and who they were looking at. It was really interesting and enlightening to me because, to trade up for a Sermon might not be that you like him, but that he really was the last kind of player on your vertical board for running back that was way above the others, right? So I agree with you. There's definitely a little bit of something there. I'm definitely buying a little more than some people, but I'll be interested to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, a guy who already is making a little bit of a name for himself at wide receiver. In that next tier, you've got a bunch of guys. The one that has really great draft capital to me is the other Elijah, the wide receiver. So, I might be more interested in Rondell from a talent perspective, but I think that Elijah is in the better landing spot.
I would agree with you. I think Elijah Moore probably has a higher potential in fantasy football than Rondale Moore does, just in terms of targets, in terms of volume, in terms of, scoring touchdowns. Like Rondale Moore's going to have some big plays. He's going to have some good weeks. You're playing best ball. I think Rondale Moore is a fine target. I think Elijah Moore has higher upside to be really like a consistent wide receiver too, with some big numbers in there. There's no reason he can't be the number 1 target for the Jets. I mean, Corey Davis is fine, and Jameson Crowder's probably going to get cut, and Denzel Mims is fine. But I'm kind of with you. I have kind of those two, and then Terrace Marshall's the other guy that I really like from
love his landing spot.
Carolina drafted back with his offensive coordinator and Joe Brady. He's going to be the outside receiver there. I think he's a guy that I'm going to be, picking up in a lot of places.
Yeah. If I told you I was thinking of him at 1.6, would you think I'm crazy?
I personally wouldn't. I have him. On my big board, I have Rashad Bateman, above him, but I have Devonta Smith below him. I think I'd rather have Marshall, so I couldn't fault you there.
So let's talk about this whole Carolina thing again. Being a Giant fan, we heard the Giants might get Matt Rule. And, that was exciting. And all of a sudden, he visits the Giants and he couldn't get out of there quick enough and go sign with Carolina. I mean, what a great decision you want someone making a great decision. The Giants, he wouldn't have had any power. He would be sitting there watching Dave Gettleman fuck things up. Like Dave Gettleman is like the shallowest thinker that I can see I just don't see a depth of thought. It's just like, well, we need a wide receiver. Like Kadarius Toney, I felt once, like finally he traded down. I was so excited. I even made some nice tweets about the trade because I try and be fair. And then, Kadarius Toney. But let's fit. Yeah, that one really bothered me. But Carolina, I really think that's a team on the rise. And for fantasy, I am a bit infatuated with Sam Darnold for this year. They've got the offensive line, they've got the weapons, they've got the coaching, and if Sam Darnold was in this draft, he might be the one too.
I guess the Jets.
When he came out.
Yeah.
In other words, if he was in this draft class at his age with that big arm, the cannon he's got, I don't know.
I think he probably would have been the 1-5. I think most likely in this class today, right? So like if, but I don't think I think he's well above Mac Jones. I don't think he's that far off, right? Like as a prospect, I thought he was good. The interceptions were an issue that weren't an issue for the other players. But I think what you're spouting is true. Like I'm Christian McCaffrey's the 1-1, right? And DJ Moore's going very high. I think Robbie Anderson's underrated. And I like Terrace Marshall. Like if you like all those players, how do you not like Sam Darnold, right? For them to produce, like he has to be a Kirk Cousins type year.
And he had a very good draft. The couple days, everyone was like, well, they might draft Justin Fields. And then all of a sudden, you find out later that they wanted this cornerback the whole time. They were smart enough to actually lie about who they wanted, unlike Giants and Dave Gettleman. Who are constantly, like if Devonta Smith is your guy, and I would have hated that pick, but if Devonta Smith's your guy, like why every year do you hear who the Giants are going to give up? But I guess I don't want to turn this into I hate Dave Gettleman pod, but
so easy though.
It is. It really is. But my point is Carolina really seems to be going in the right direction with the way they added to that defense. That defense is going to be good in a couple years.
They already have, great pass rusher in their first round pick last year in Brian Burns. I think Horn fits the defense as a man cover corner. It seemed like they wanted Sewell or JC Horn. Those were kind of the two players. And no one was giving up. I think, the Bears called them to move up for Fields, and it just wasn't enough for them to move down to 20. So they took Horn. But they moved down. I think they had 4 trades within a couple hours on day 2, moving down, moving back up, moving around to get, the Terrace Marshall, to get Brady Christensen, the offensive tackle, who is going to help this offense too. Like, I think Carolina, if Sam Darnold's the guy, or they can find a quarterback down the line, I think this team could be one of the best in the NFL sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And us Giant fans are left with what if. Yeah. Anyway, because of Matt Rule, and they just seem to be doing it right. All right, so let's talk about the quarterbacks a little bit. Trevor Lawrence right now. Let me look up his ADP in the. I don't think he's as much in the football. Let's see where he's getting drafted. He's getting drafted at 118, right after Joe Burrow and Aaron Rodgers, and before Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, and Matt Ryan for this year. I know he's supposed to be the best prospect since Luck, but I see a lot more flaws a little bit of inconsistency in how he throws the ball. It's still not a good offensive line. I know Urban Meyer is supposed to be this great genius, but are you comfortable with Trevor Lawrence where he is right now at ADP?
I'm comfortable with it. Like I think he could meet and exceed that ADP. But I think there are some of those players that are going after him, like Matt Ryan. I mean, I'd rather have. But I think the nice thing with Trevor Lawrence is you probably have a pretty good, built-in floor. Like I actually think the offensive line's decent there. They have a good amount of weapons, and you're on a team that's going to want to score quickly. And that's not always good for the team. I think the defense is going to be the problem, which is good for Trevor Lawrence. Like that's good for us fantasy players if they have to play catch up and throw around. And so I think we are going to see a lot of passing. So I'm comfortable with it. Now that I'm starting to do some of these redrafts, I'm interested tonight even to, I think he'll tempt me, but I'm not sure if I could take him over some of those veterans. Like, I could take him over Brady. I think Stafford's a little overrated. I probably want Ryan now with Pitts, but I think Lawrence, he's going to stay healthy. He's pretty young, so I feel pretty good about. He has a really nice floor built in for himself.
Gotcha. All right, that was good to hear for me. I don't have any interest in any of the other three for redraft this year. I know that Justin Fields was your number 2 quarterback. I would not be shocked if Andy Dalton's behind center to start the season, but a lot of people want to make Andy Dalton like some guarantee. If Justin Fields shows he can play right away, I think they're going to play him. So I do think he has some redraft value, but you just got to draft him this early, realizing that there's a very good chance you're cutting him in the first couple weeks, and the guy who gets the value out of him is someone else later.
Right. I think that's the problem with drafting him or Trey Lance, because I think if either of them are starting, like I want them. I want the guys that can run a 4.4 and can give you some of that rushing ability. But it'd be so hard to draft. I just don't see a reason to do it because I'm with you. I think Andy Dalton starts. I think Jimmy Garoppolo starts. Like I'd almost rather draft Zach Wilson last round and then cut him for Fields, when Fields gets the job or looks like he'll get the job. I think that might be a better strategy.
Yeah, for best ball, you need 3 in the FF, in a 28 round draft, you need 3. And I would argue even in the 18 round drafts, with the position being the one that gives you the most points every week, I was always a 2 QB guy on Fanball, which is 20 rounds, but there's defenses. And you've got to start 3 wide receivers. So I was a 2 quarterback guy there, 18 rounds with no defense. I almost always take a 3rd quarterback. But for football guys, like someone said to me on a podcast recently that I guested on, they said, you took Lamar Jackson in the 6th round and then you didn't take another quarterback. If you take a stud QB who you're going to play 15 weeks, and why, especially this early, litter your bench with a backup quarterback who, 90% of the times isn't going to play.
So let me ask you: Are you comfortable in best ball where you're drafting 3 quarterbacks to take Justin Fields or Trey Lance, take that upside as your 3rd quarterback in a best ball?
I haven't. Because quarterback win rates are not the big win rates come out of the wide receiver and the running back position. So tight end and quarterback, in the FFPC last year, Travis Kelce had this unbelievable year, right? And he still didn't hit 20% on the FFPC. He was 24% on Fanball. You would think he would have a higher win percentage on the PPR 1.5, but it was the opposite, and that was because he was drafted almost at the end of the second round, right where you could get him with Alvin Kamara. Like 18th, 19th, 20th. That matches right up with 4 or 5 where Kamara was being drafted. I don't like to put someone on my best ball teams that I don't know if they're going to play more than 4 or 5 games. But that's where Sam Darnold has been coming in lately for me. What's another name? I'll give you another name that I've been drafting. Kirk Cousins. Well, yeah, he's normally a first. Wow. Lance and Fields are really high. I draft a good bit of Carson Wentz. Fitz is a good third quarterback. Darnold's a very good one. Cam Newton, I think, is still a decent one. I'm comfortable with David Carr. And I also earlier, I did draft a good bit of Taysom Hill because I just think that, he's going to start 5. I guess if I like Taysom Hill, I should like Justin Fields, but I did draft a decent early amount of Taysom Hill.
I think it's an interesting discussion when you have those players that have that rushing ability to put up big points. But like you said, the win rates really aren't there for quarterbacks. If this was a receiver or running back that we knew had that upside, if they just got time, then you'd do it. So
for best ball, though, I think it's not bad, But if you look at the ADP, it looks like Fields, now that people know where they've gone, looks like Fields is starting to move up boards. I maybe a little more than I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the draft. Let's go to some teams that we haven't looked at yet. One of my favorite receivers went to the graveyard. That is the Baltimore Ravens. Mr. Bateman is a guy that I like, he's another guy that if I took him at 1.6, would you shoot me?
No, he's my, I think 1.7 right now. So
yeah. So I definitely don't dislike him. I think that Lamar Jackson's going to bounce back. I think that you saw that unrealistic, just like every pass he threw was a touchdown 2 years ago. And then last year he regressed more than I think we expected. I just think that the overall, the way that, him having a full off season and, figuring out what might have went wrong a little bit. And then you adding Bateman and adding some other, Sammy Watkins, overall, I feel like that boat is getting lifted a bit. What are your thoughts on Lamar Jackson this year and Rashad Bateman? I don't know how much go ahead.
So look, I'm with you on the Ravens. I don't think it's a bad spot. I think they realized they need to throw the ball more than they did before. That maybe that was kind of the problem that they didn't have. Lamar Jackson's never had a receiver, like a receiver. Don't tell me that Hollywood Brown is a receiver. Like, I don't think he's really ever had anyone to throw the ball to that was a wide receiver. So now you bring in Rashad Bateman, number one. You bring in another one of my top 10 pre-draft receivers in Tylan Wallace later. You bring in Sammy Watkins. I think that they have some weapons to throw the ball to. And the thing is, hopefully this is what you like about Bateman too. I really like the way that he comes off the line, very quick snap routes. He gets
that's exactly what I liked about it.
Those slants are deadly, and Lamar Jackson can throw that slant. That's not hard.
It's Calvin Ridley-esque.
Yeah.
When I watched Calvin Ridley tape, I worried a little bit about him at first, but the way he is able to make a cut and then accelerate and get open, whether with a quick down and in or a slant like you mentioned, I loved how Bateman got off the line. It was one of the 2 sexiest things I've seen on tape this year.
And I think the Ravens have a good offensive coordinator in in Wink, and I think he'll take advantage of that. That's a pass that Lamar Jackson can make. Lamar Jackson can make it easily. It's not tough. Rashad Bateman can get open. So,
well, he already did it. I mean,
right.
And then you add the fact, I mean, Hollywood might not be everything that, tickles your fancy, but he hasn't played bad at times, and he certainly opens up the field, and Mark Andrews is a very good weapon down the field. I think Bateman's the perfect addition, because he brings a completely different skill set to that receiving core. But my point is, I think that they're all going to be better for it.
Right, and I think we see a little more balance to that offense. I think that they don't want Lamar Jackson to, run around and maybe take some of those hits. Like let's give him those options of throwing some quick timing routes to Rashad Bateman. So I'm hoping for a fall in some of these rookie drafts. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but I'm hoping I can get him at the 201 or something. Would be a dream.
Yeah, I don't expect that in our draft.
No,
especially since you have all these picks and you like them.
Right, true. I mean, that back end of the first, I have a handful, and if he's sitting there, I think he'll be on my team. So,
all right. So Jamar Chase obviously is. I mean, to me, all things being equal, he's the 1-1. Would you agree?
I would. He's my 1-1. And he's my 1-1 straight up.
All right. So we're getting to the end here. I'm going to need to use the facilities before the draft. Let's do like a speed round, Shane, before we end here. The Browns didn't do much other than Anthony Schwartz. Mm-hmm. But I just think that team is going to be a good team this year. Dallas didn't do much with. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'd say really good draft, and Schwartz, 4-2 guy, deep threat. Worth a late round flyer in a deep league.
Gotcha. We covered poor Jamar Johnson and Keelan Hill. I mean, Kylan Hill not only lasted to the 7th round, but he landed in probably the stone worst spot he could.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay, he's not, rising. He's going to compete for that 3rd running back spot. I mean, Jamar Jefferson, I think, ended up better in Detroit, where at least with Carrion now cut, maybe he has a shot to make that team. But neither of those guys now are relevant at all. So,
let's see. What do you think? You think Amon-Ra has much of a chance? I mean, Detroit's so pitiful.
I'm not a big Amon-Ra St. Brown fan as a player. I mean, I think he'll play kind of the big slot in that offense, which could be fine. I think he's probably going a little bit too high for me in rookie drafts and redrafts because I still think Rashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, like Quintus Cephas, they're still going to be there. I know we don't like them as fantasy guys, but I think they're good values, those veterans. So I have Amon-Ra St. Brown like lower than guys like Nico Collins and Amari Rodgers and Diane Brown right now.
Yeah, and Dan Campbell, Cro-Magnon, doesn't seem like the type that, I want the grizzled vets. I want to win.
Right.
The Chiefs didn't draft any offensive players. I'll tell you, a nice deep sleeper is Byron Pringle this year.
They did draft Cornell Powell out of Clemson late. So I think he'll compete with Pringle, but I agree. I think they did resign DeMarcus Robinson, who stinks, but he took less money to go back to the Chiefs. So yeah, I like the Pringle call. I don't think Powell. I think he'll struggle to make the active roster, but yeah.
How bad was the Rams taking of Tutu?
I just didn't understand it. And I even like Tutu Atwell more than a lot of people, not for fantasy, but for real life. But it's like same thing with Seattle and Dwayne Eskridge. I just feel like you're drafting a 3rd round receiver who's built on speed and probably better at special teams stuff. And, I think Eskridge maybe has a shot to do a little bit there in Seattle, but they're not going to pass enough. And same thing with the Rams. Like, I don't know. I don't think Tutu Atwell is going to fill Brandon Cook's shoes or anything anytime soon. So I don't see what's happening.
Yeah. Eskridge is a guy that Adam Levitan and Evan Silva were, especially Adam, was a little high on. I really struggle to see him being a fantasy asset this year.
I think a big problem is he was 24 years old playing in the MAC. I hope he was dominating players, because if he wasn't, then he really wasn't good. I don't think he can handle NFL talent.
I agree. Ramondre Stevenson is a very, very interesting spot. If you believe the adage, always draft the last Patriot running back.
I think after those top 5 we talked about, and Etienne, Harris, Williams, Sermon, Carter, I think the next 3 are in a nice tier. I think Stevenson's in there. You could argue, I could dig an argument he's the RB6 because he does have that Damian Harris and Sony Michel type of, is he explosive enough, but he's tough enough to get this short yardage. I think Kenneth Gainwell in Philly and Chuba Hubbard in Carolina, which we may not like as spots in terms of being the lead back, but those two are in spots where if the lead guy gets hurt, both of which got hurt last year, they could be top 15 players. So I think Stevenson's kind of the safe swing for a single, and Gainwell and Hubbard could be values that you need something to happen and fall your way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it's 8:52. I am really, really tired. I think I might just end it. I think I need to focus on my draft. I will do a live draft coming up pretty soon. But if you've noticed me being a little off the last hour, I am really tired. It was a long week, and I think I'm going to focus on the draft. And Shane, I can't keep going like this. I can't even keep my head up. I really appreciate you continuing to come on. Thank you very much. Fabulous as always information, and we'll see you soon on the pod again.
Yeah, if you just promise not to snipe me in this draft, since you're picking right before me, and we can call it even.
All right. When do you pick?
111. I'm right after you. So
no, really?
Yeah.
Oh man, now we should stay on. No, we can't stay on.
No.
All the more we can't. All right. I know what rookies you like. I don't know what regular players you like, but that's going to do it for this edition of the Run to Daylight podcast, and we'll see you next week.